I think there's some fairly, like there's a fairly obvious opportunity in electric aircraft, because all transport will electrify over time, with the exception of rockets, ironically. Yeah. There's, I think there's two areas which, they're fraught with issues, but it's one of those things where if you don't do something, maybe not doing something is worse, like on the AI front or on genetics, So those are the two things I think, besides sustainable transport, the internet, and making life multiplanetary, rewriting genetics and AI, the latter two are the ones that can most change destiny of humanity. But they're really dodgy. So, maybe I'd try to do something in one of those two areas, but they're, fraught with difficulty.
Elizabeth Holmes was here earlier, spoke during the lunch hour. Do you think about genetics and longevity and trying to sort of avoid, your friend Larry Page is investing in a business hoping to end death?
I don't, I'm not actually a huge proponent of longevity. I do think that having a good life for longer is better. Like you'd want to address the things that happen to you when you're older, like dementia and so forth. Those are pretty important. But I'm not sure it's sort of actually want to do that. I want to get into the genetics thing, but it is something that's going to fundamentally change humanity and along with AI. So
you don't want to live forever so that you can actually get to Mars?
I definitely don't. I don't know, 100 good ones.
100 good ones or 100 more good ones? You're 44?
100 good ones in total I think is probably fine, and maybe a bit longer.
We try to invest in a very broad range of technologies. So we funded an electric airplane, or funding an electric airplane company. We've done AI companies. We've done.
How realistic is the electric airplane, by the way?
I think it should work. I think it makes sense.
Yeah,
absolutely. The math should work. I think I no huge surprise, but I'll agree with Elon on those two areas. I think if you could pick two things that I'm not already working really hard on, AI, having AI go in the positive direction, which I really think it can, and I think thinking about sort of genetic technology.
Genetic technology.
I think sustainable energy is the most important problem that we face this century. That's like a known difficult thing that we have to solve. Like if we continue to rely on burning hydrocarbons, the future is going to be quite bad, and the vast majority of the scientific establishment believes that. And the evidence, I think, is, for anyone with a scientific background is unequivocal. So we've got to solve sustainable energy. I'm a big fan of solar because we've got this big fusion ball in the sky called the sun, and it shows up every day. So if we can use solar energy plus batteries, we can actually have a complete solution for sustainable energy generation, and then we need to use it in a sustainable way, which is where you need the electric transport.
The thing I would add, I think short of friendly AI, like the most important thing we can do for sort of quality of life of the poorest half of the world. I think that every time I look into this, it's really amazing how much the cost of energy and the quality of life correlate.
What about nuclear energy? You have some investments in nuclear energy.
Yeah, what I've always said is I think the likely to work at some point in the next couple of decades, and that's a really big deal. I think that it's good to have a backup option. It's good to have two sources, but it's all sort of fusion when you think about it.
Yeah, I'm big. I think fusion. I think it's definitely possible to make fusion work, but I think and I used to be a big fan of having that as the long-term energy source. But I'm inclined to think like indirect fusion from the sun essentially is going to be the primary source, and then to some degree there will be fusion reactors for, maybe if
Cargo
you're
ships
really,
or whatever.
yeah, if you're really far north or really far.
There's some risk. There's no risk.
Not really.
Zero. I'm an idiot. I don't.
No. No. I mean, with fusion, the difficulty is keeping it going. Not, with fission, you have some meltdown risk. Although there's new technology on the fission front that makes the meltdown risk extremely low. But with fusion, the great difficulty is keeping the fire from going out. It's quite hard to sustain a fusion reaction. Unless you have something very big like the sun, and where you have the sun has gravitational confinement of the fusion reaction. So since you can't do gravitational confinement on Earth, you have to do some sort of electromagnetic confinement, in one form or another, or a kinetic confinement by slamming things into each other. So it's quite tricky to prevent a fusion explosion from not immediately extinguishing atoms or two hydrogen isotopes technically, and slam them together and form helium. That's fusion.
Right.
And then fission is like when you've got like a heavy atom that is decaying at a relatively like a noticeable rate, like uranium or plutonium, and decays into smaller atoms. Then that's fission.
Okay, I didn't do so well in science, so we're going to try to move along. But you recently said that you wanted to nuke Mars. I didn't really understand
I was using sort of
that,
colloquial
so maybe you
terms there. Mars, I sort of was a little flippant about that.
I think it's a really decent idea.
Thank you. So yeah, what I was really getting at, but it's hard to convey that in like 30 seconds, on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, was that the sun is a nuclear explosion, a fusion explosion. That's what the sun is. It's an ongoing fusion explosion. So if you wanted to add energy to Mars, like warm up Mars, really the source of almost all energy in the universe is fusion. Even fission is, originally there was fusion, and then that then later resulted in fission. But what I was really talking about is creating two little suns, two pulsing suns above the north and south pole of Mars that would warm the poles up enough so that the frozen CO2 would gasify and densify the atmosphere. Some of the water would also heat up, and you'd have sort of more water vapor and CO2 in the Martian atmosphere, which in that case is good because the CO2 ends up warming Mars up. And so you get a positive sort of reaction, like it's a positive cycle of warming on Mars. Like you want to warm Mars up, you don't want to warm Earth up, so.
Why would you ever want to live on Mars?
It looks like a great adventure. It's really important to the preservation of civilization or life as we know it, more than just humanity, because of course we would bring life as we know it to Mars. And there's no life that we can detect on the surface of Mars. There may be some subterranean bacterial life, but it's on the surface there isn't anything. So this would be the extension of life to another planet, or life as we know it to another planet, and I think would make a huge difference to the probable lifespan of human civilization and life as we know it. So it's sort of like an insurance policy, a life insurance policy for life collectively, and so it's probable.
Because
this is if we. It's like what kind of future do you want to have? Do you want to have a future where we are forever confined to one planet, or one where we are out there exploring the stars and on many planets? And I think the latter one is far more exciting and inspiring, because the former is basically waiting around until some extinction event. So, because eventually there will be one, and it might be quite far in the future, but it also might not be far in the future. There's really two main reasons, I think, to make life multiplanetary and to establish a self-sustaining civilization on Mars. One is the defensive reason to ensure that the light of consciousness as we know it is not extinguished or lasts much longer. And the second is that it would be an amazing adventure that we could all enjoy vicariously, if not personally.
My concern is that I think the AI question is likely to become pressing and important to deal with before we can establish a full colony on Mars.
That's true.
Hard
Like
to
a
send
program.
a human through space.
But the AI is going to go.
Like 20 minutes, on a laser beam. It's easy.
Do you guys?
There's a much that then as you get more advanced in life, that there's less and less likelihood of like sophisticated life.
But you don't. Do you think there's do you think there are aliens out there?
That we can talk to? You mean, as opposed to like bacteria?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a great Onion article recently about like like NASA should only hold a press conference if they find aliens that we can talk to. Where are the aliens? Like, if there are so many planets out there, and the universe is almost 14 billion years old, why aren't the aliens everywhere? This is one of the most perplexing questions, because you could basically bicycle to Alpha Centauri in a few 100,000 years, like meaning that's at bicycle speed. So it's sort of like, in 100 million years, like even at a very slow speed, you could completely blanket the galaxy.
In the back, and we've had this conversation before, you please weigh in on this. And I think it's a thought experiment that you have suggested, that we are all collectively right now living in a simulation. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's say the advancement of video games from say 40 years ago, when we started out with Pong, and you just had like rectangles batting a rectangle to each other, and now we've got photorealistic 3D simulations with millions of people playing simultaneously, or 3D games with millions of people playing simultaneously that are just getting better. Now we've got virtual reality headsets, so you can just put it on and it feels like you're right there. You'll have haptic feedback, meaning force feedback sticks, so you can actually pick up something and feel like you're picking up something, like have haptic gloves. And if you extrapolate that advancement at any rate at all, like if you say, okay, let's say it slows down by a factor of 100 starting right now. Okay, so then I mean, the video games will be indistinguishable from reality in, let's say, 200 years instead of 20 years or something like that.
But you don't think that somebody has a joystick somewhere else in some other, you know where I'm going with
It certainly
this.
doesn't feel like that. I mean, I don't think I'm being played by somebody in a video game. But then people in video games don't generally think that.
In the game and the environment, they have this experience when they do that for the first time, and they take it off, and then they just freeze for 10 seconds, and then you talk to them, and it's clear that like their belief that this is actual reality has been shaken, because they were so convinced in virtual reality that was real. And so if I can take this off, like, why aren't there other layers? I also think it ties interestingly back to the Fermi Paradox.
Yeah, exactly.
If it is a simulation, sort of that would be a pretty good answer for why there are no aliens.
Never. But I mean, with what Oculus and Valve are coming out with, and I believe some of that, like the first VR headsets are due out.
Early next year?
Yeah, like in the next several months. And the demos that I've seen, and I think Sam's probably seen too, are incredibly compelling. And there is that strange feeling, because you put the headset on in like a very nondescript, bland room, and you put the headset on and suddenly you're in anywhere. Like you could be reduced to a sort of fully optioned version. So it's not like a base price of $132,000. It's and we'll have a version that's still expensive, on the expensive side, but before any incentives would be about $75K next year. With incentives and whatnot, it's maybe 65. So it's still expensive, but it's not as crazy as 132. Right. And then in a couple of years we should have the Model 3, and that'll be starting price of $35,000. So it's a smaller car, but it's, a lot more affordable.
Okay, so for the
I think it just said something like there'll be the Model 3 and the Model Y, and that one of them will have like a Falcon Wing door, which is like pretty obviously the Model Y. But I deleted that and like, I don't know, a dozen other tweets because I just sort of had like kind of a rambling Twitter history. But it had no significance. The delete has no significance. Like, I don't think deleting a tweet like makes it go away from the internet or something.
So why delete? Why? What is this going to become in your mind?
You sure you don't want him to answer?
Yeah, we know what he's going to say.
Look, I mean, I think as most people who own one think it's the best car like out there. I had a Roadster before, a Tesla Roadster, which was not the best car. But the Model S, it really is. Like, it's the best car on the market. And I think that people think of this like existing car companies, but actually this is like a software company with a car attached to it. And it's, you just like, you sort of point and click. You like point the wheel somewhere, you push the thing down, and it just kind of gets there. It doesn't make noise. It's very reliable. The software actually works. It's the only car with good software. So I think people really like it. Now, yeah, it's like really expensive still, but I think, I'm confident that a mass market Tesla will do very well. And I also think the other electric cars I've driven feel like many years behind.
Right. You talked
because it's a holistic product experience, but its software is increasingly an increasing proportion of the problem, particularly as you get to autonomy. So
there's a view. I don't know if.
Well, no, not quite like that. But we are going to upload new software soon, and this is not actually a secret or anything. We have version 7 of our software, which turns on highway autopilot, so the car will be able to steer by itself on highways or any kind of road that doesn't have really steep, sharp curves on it. And then also it'll steer quite well in traffic. So those are the two scenarios where it's I think going to be quite good at steering. That's in public beta right now. So we have 600 or 700 Tesla drivers, owners that are testing the auto steer software.
Go ahead.
Are likely to get here much more quickly than people realize.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
If you ask most people, they'd still say that's 10 to 20 years away. And I actually think we'll have sort of like full point-to-point autonomous driving in a few years. It won't be uncommon.
Few years, like
technologically. I mean, you'll be able to demonstrate it, but you won't be able to go to fully autonomous until you get regulatory approval.
Yeah, that'll take longer.
So there's a time difference between when it is technologically possible, in a general sense, so that not just like in a very tightly mapped situation like say Mountain View or Palo Alto,
right?
But in a general sense of like can it do point to point virtually anywhere?
Right.
I think that's only 2 to 3 years away. But then approval from regulators of having it be autonomous is anywhere from 1 to 5 years after that, depending upon the location, right. Because the regulators have to be convinced that it is substantial. I think they'll want to see that it's significantly more, significantly safer than cars that are driven by people.
I want to open the audience, get your shot on goal in just a second. I want to talk about entrepreneurship, because both of you are entrepreneurs. You invest in them, you are one, and you think about this a lot. Your old pal, Peter Thiel, likes to say that he would not invest in somebody who's over the age of 30 years old, that it should be the cutoff. You're 44 now. He's invested in you.
Yeah, I guess make some exceptions.
But you may be the exception to the rule. As somebody who invests in companies every day, do you think there's a cutoff? There's a lot of...
I mean, we've said this before, but when we've looked at our data, the mean age of the entrepreneurs we fund is just around 29 or 30. So there's obviously lots of over 30 entrepreneurs that we fund, some of which have gone on to create multi-billion-dollar companies. So I think certainly you can't say it's impossible for people over 30 to create companies. That's ridiculous. And we plan to continue to invest in people of all ages. The correlation that we've noticed is that if you look at the really successful companies we've had, the multi-billion-dollar companies, the average age for those founders does skew significantly younger, but the success rate of founders of, this binary, is the company's success or not, skews older than 30. So, younger entrepreneurs, I think, tend to take bigger risks. Maybe they're willing to work on these very long time horizon projects, but that's the only correlation we see.
Yeah, like there's that old saying, it's 1% inspiration, I think, and 99% perspiration, I think is generally true. I mean, a lot of times, like, companies start out with an idea that's actually wrong, but they adapt quickly enough to get it to something that's right. And I can say, like, at the beginning of Tesla, we started out with we started the company with 2 false premises, like, that would turn out to be, like, really dumb. One was that we'd be able to license the drivetrain technology from a company called AC Propulsion in Southern California, and that it would just work. That totally didn't work. And then we also thought we'd be able to adapt the Lotus Elise chassis at low cost and be able to essentially put the AC Propulsion drivetrain technology in a Lotus Elise chassis, and then just build that quickly and sell it, and that would be okay. But like I said, the AC Propulsion technology did not lend itself to any kind of cost-effective, reliable car. It was okay for, like, a small prototype, but not for a commercial product. And then the Lotus Elise, that ended up being worse than if we had designed a car from the beginning, because we ended up changing like 96% of the components in the car, and invalidating all of the crash results and all the safety stuff. The car ended up being 30% heavier, it had to be longer, and it ended up being like if you had a house in mind, and instead of actually building that house from scratch, you got some existing house, and ended up knocking everything except one wall in the basement out, and it would have been better to just build the house from the beginning, the house you wanted. So it basically, Tesla was started on the basis of 2 dumb ideas, but we managed to, it was a tough one to overcome those two issues, but we managed to get past them. That's I think the more important thing is, like, start somewhere and then really be prepared to question your assumptions, fix what you did wrong, and adapt to reality.
How do you and it will have a significant impact because it'll really change the people who vote. So I think that may take a while because there are a lot of people who don't want to see the electorate change, but over a 20-year time frame. I always try to think about things over these sort of 10 or 20-year time frames. I think you can get so caught up in what's happening this month or next year. Are we in a bubble? Are we buying at a low tick or a high tick? But eventually it's going to happen, and I take solace in that. Anyway, Elon on Donald Trump.
I mean, I don't really have strong feelings, except that hopefully Trump doesn't get the nomination of the Republican Party. That's because I think that's that wouldn't be good. But I mean,
Barry Diller said he would move out.
I get involved in politics as little as possible. Yeah, there's some amount that I have to get involved in, mostly because SpaceX has to battle Boeing and Lockheed, for national security and civil space launch contracts. So if we don't battle them, then we'll lose. So,
how corrupt is that whole thing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I actually would say that on balance, I guess it's not that corrupt, because if it was corrupt, then SpaceX would have no chance. Because SpaceX, it's gotten a bit bigger these days, but it was very tiny when we won our first government contract. And if it had been deeply corrupt, then we would not have won anything. So, I think actually at the greater the level of visibility politically, the less corruption occurs. So I think there's actually probably the least corruption at the presidential level, then at the Senate level and the House, and then there can be a bit more corruption at the state level. It's basically how much attention are people paying? That defines how much corruption occurs.
Right.
Yeah. because what the LA Times article did was add up all incentives that Tesla has received and all incentives that Tesla will receive. So like over a 30-year period, and made it sound like a big number. But it's, like if somebody's earning $50,000 a year, you don't call them a millionaire because over the next 20 years they will cumulatively earn $1 million. But that's effectively what that article did. The incentives, I think, for Tesla and SolarCity, what they really do is balance out the actual and de facto incentives that carbon-producing activities have. So, and I don't think they actually balance it out. So the carbon-producing activities still sort of overwhelm the incentives that electric cars and solar receives. I mean, for example, there's a 20% tax incentive for a stripper oil well. And the incentive for solar is currently 30%, but dropping to 10% in 2 years.
Right.
So in 2 years, the incentive for solar power will be half that of a stripper oil well.
Right.
So and SpaceX made it in spite of Boeing and Lockheed receiving a $1 billion plus subsidy for their launch activities. So I think in the case of SpaceX, it was sort of success in spite of incentives, and in the case of SolarCity and Tesla, the incentives were, moderately helpful, but not the deciding factor. They're a catalyst. They made things happen a little faster than they would otherwise happen. But you look at something like there's a $7,500 tax credit for EVs. Okay, so that ends up being a 10% discount that the consumer receives for buying the car. It's not like night and day difference.
Right. Okay, we got a lot of people who...
That we enslave it or it enslaves us, but there's this happy symbiotic vision, which I don't think is the default case, but what we should work towards. I think already humans and AI are co-evolving, and no one's paid attention to this yet. But I don't think there's any human left that understands all of how Google search results are ranked on that first page. It really is machine learning algorithms. So when we search on Google, it's an AI deciding what we should see. When a dating site matches two people together, there's a machine learning algorithm that no human understands how it works, that is getting people together that then have babies. And so in effect, you have this like machine learning algorithm breeding humans. And so really, you do. And so there's this, and then, those people work on the algorithms later. And so I think the happy vision of the future is sort of humans and AI in a symbiotic relationship, distributed AI where it sort of empowers a lot of different individuals, not this single AI that kind of governs everything that we all do that's, a million times smarter, a billion times smarter than any other entity. So I think that's what we should work towards.
Discovery and new things, and learning about the universe. There was quite a bit of attention paid to the discovery of water flowing on Mars. I'd certainly say that it should be more, but I think it's okay. I think it's not bad. I think we're better off than the show would suggest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to try to get to everybody up there if we can, so go ahead.
If we're to have some new form of transport in California, which I think would be good to have, then we want to aspire to have something that is cutting edge technology. When I was reading about the high-speed rail plan, it's a lot of money for something which isn't obviously compelling relative to a car or a plane in terms of the time it would take to complete the journey. And it will saddle California taxpayers with a pretty significant amount of money that they've got to pay. So it's like if you pay a high price, you should have a great outcome. Like that should be the sensible thing. And that doesn't seem to be what is happening from what I can tell. And so I was trying to think, well, what would be the fastest way you could get from, say, LA to San Francisco or cities in between, and ended up mentioning that I had an idea actually at a talk, not unlike this, and then discovered my initial idea didn't work, and then kept iterating with a bunch of other people, and came up with the Hyperloop. So that's sort of where it actually it finally did work from a technical standpoint. And now there are some companies pursuing that, which is awesome. And I hope we see it come to fruition. SpaceX is doing a Hyperloop student competition where teams will compete to see who can make the best pod. And so we're doing a sort of a mile-long Hyperloop section in LA, just right near SpaceX, really Hawthorne technically, but LA County. And so I think that's going to be pretty exciting to see what the students can come up with and who can come up with the most advanced pod design. I think we're going to set it so that like the winner would be who can get their pod to go the fastest within a 1 mile section, and then have a big crash area at the end. Plus if the pod doesn't slow down in time, can sort of get into the crash area. I think that'll be quite an exciting competition.
And I've never agreed with this. I think, so two-part answer. One, I actually think we're on an incredible pace of innovation. What's happening, as what happens historically, is that when there's a great opportunity, sort of talent sloshes around and finds that. And there's been incredible progress in software in the last couple of decades. There will be more. And so a lot of talented people are choosing to work on it. But that doesn't mean we're not making progress. It just means this one area is transforming the world incredibly quickly. People are doing other things as well, as you mentioned. And at Y Combinator, we fund companies doing a lot of things. Here's the issue. The press loves to write about the software companies, and they have very little interest in writing about the other stuff. And so as an outsider, you would say, well, there's only software. But that just doesn't reflect reality. And, we fund companies doing all sorts of things, and I think we love funding technological innovation on a long time scale. The press does not love covering it. And also, I think there's nothing wrong with working on software.
The ideal companies to have as the first thing. Generally, because if something is capital intensive, it's really hard to get going.
Is it true that you totally ran out of money supporting those two companies?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so I guess that would not have been a good first.
No. The thought I had in the beginning was, because I'm not really an investor. I just basically invest in the companies that I help create. And I thought, coming out of PayPal, I thought I'd invest half the money in SpaceX and Tesla and SolarCity, and then I still have the other half left over. Yeah, except that didn't really work out, because then the recession of 2008 and 2009 came along, and it was a choice of either invest everything or the companies would definitely die. So it's if I invest everything, then they might live. And if I don't invest everything, then they're definitely going to die. So I ended up investing everything, and it was real tight, actually. In fact, the Tesla financing round at the end of 2008, I remember quite well, because we closed that financing round on the last hour of the last day that it was possible. It was 6 p.m. Christmas Eve, 2008. And we would have gone bankrupt 2 days after Christmas if we hadn't closed that round. Yeah, that was hard.
Okay. We got to wrap up. Final question for both of you, but I'm